Hello and welcome to another video here on AV Forums. I'm Phil Hinton, I'm the editor, and today we're going to look at the LG C1 OLED TV. We're going to look at the best picture settings out of the box for SDR, Standard Dynamic Range, HDR, High Dynamic Range, and Dolby Vision and Dolby Vision IQ. As always, these are the best out of the box settings, and first of all what we want to do is we want to bring up the settings menu. So we press the settings button on the remote and then we're going to select all settings. So the first thing we need to do out of the box is we need to take it out of eco mode, and we also need to switch off energy saving. So we're going to find energy saving first of all, which is under support, and we click on energy saving. And we're going to change this to off. So this way it's not going to interfere with the brightness of the TV in any way. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into select mode. Again, this is standard dynamic range that we're in, and we're going to select filmmaker mode. And as you can see, it dramatically changes the white balance to the correct white balance, so we can see content as it was intended to be seen and as it was mastered. Before we go on and set any of the picture settings, we're also going to go into aspect ratio, and we're going to do this for SDR, HDR and Dolby Vision content, and we're going to do it if we switch our inputs as well. We're going to check that just scan is switched to on, so we get the full picture on screen with no scaling being introduced. Right, so we're going to do SDR first, so standard dynamic range. The way to do this is just to have any content playing in the background that is SDR, so TV tuner or a Blu-ray or DVD. And this is going to be fairly easy because we're in filmmaker mode. Filmmaker mode is designed to get the TV in the correct white balance and color gamut, so we can see images as they're intended to be seen, as the creator intended. So that means that all the processing should be switched off in filmmaker mode. So we're just going to quickly go through and check that that is the case. So we're going to click on brightness. Now brightness at 25, that measures 100 nits, which is correct for darkroom viewing, but everybody's not going to be in a dark room or in a grading suite, so 25 might be a little bit too dull for your room. Now the best way to figure out exactly what you need to set this to is if you're in a bright room, then you need to turn this up, the brightness up. If you're in the dark room, then you need to turn the brightness down. And you want to do it so you don't lose any of the white detail in the image, so you're not clipping any of the bright detail. So in this example here, if I go all the way to the top, you'll notice that the tops of the mountains or the clouds might start to clip out, and you might start to lose detail there, depending on how the camera picks this up. But anyway, you want to set this to the correct brightness for your room. So if it's a bright room, you want to go brighter. If it's a dark room, then like I say, 25 is 100 nits, which is the industry standard. In this room, because I've got a little bit of light, I'm going to take it up to about halfway, which means that I can see what's in the shadows, but I can also see the highlights without them being clipped out and losing any detail in there. So once we've done that, we're going to go through and look at the other settings here, and they should be switched off. So dynamic, auto dynamic contrast, peak brightness, those should be switched off. We don't need those. Gamma, again, this is going to depend on what kind of room you're in. If you're in a darker room, then BT 1886 or 2.4 are probably the correct settings. If you're in a far brighter room and the picture does look a little bit darker, you're losing detail in some of the picture areas, then if you click on 2.2, it will brighten the picture up a little bit, but it still keeps some of the dynamics in there in the image. But 2.4 or BT 1886 are usually the correct settings for the average living room, unless you're in a really bright room. Then when it comes to black level and motion eye care, we're going to leave those switched off. So we're going to go to the next section, which is color. And again, we don't need to touch anything in here. Out of the box in filmmaker mode, everything should be right, so we're going to leave everything at default in here. Fine tune is the color management system, and white balance is obviously the white balance, so the grayscale. We do not touch these. You need a profile meter and software to calibrate these settings. You cannot do it by eye. Your eye is not good enough to differentiate enough to set these by eye. You absolutely need a meter and software to do this, so we're going to leave those alone. And again, we're just going to go into clarity and we're going to check that everything in here is also switched off. So we're going to leave sharpness at the default of 10, super resolution, noise reduction, MPEG noise reduction, smooth gradation should all be switched off. Cinema screen is switched on. That's the correct cadence detection for film material at 24 frames per second. It'll correctly show that with 5.5 pull down. And true motion, we want to have that switched off because that's filmmaker mode and everything should be switched off so we can see film content as it was intended to be seen. You could go in here and use a new cinematic movement setting. Basically what that does is it does add interpolation, but it prefers or preferences the movement to real frames rather than the made up frames to try and get away from the soap opera effect. But if your eyes are like mine, I can see that straight away. So for SDR, that's everything that we need to check because we're in filmmaker mode. Everything else is correct. So all we need to do now is click apply all inputs, and we're going to do this for all of our settings. So we're going to do this for HDR and Dolby Vision. Once we've set everything up and checked that everything is correct, you click apply to all inputs, and then we're going to click yes. And basically that applies those settings to all the HDMI inputs and also the TV tuner if you select filmmaker mode. So next we're going to do HDR10. So I now have some HDR10 content playing, and you need to do the same if you're going to follow me and put the settings in for HDR10. You can get content on Amazon or putting in a 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray that doesn't have Dolby Vision. It will play back the base layer, which is HDR10. So going into settings once again, and again we're going to go to HDR select mode, and we're going to go to filmmaker mode. Now, like SDR, where you could use the ISF modes, we could use cinema mode here, but doing that, there is picture processing switched on in cinema mode, and in SDR, if we use the ISF modes, they are the same. So using filmmaker mode, and the reason we use filmmaker mode in these videos is that we know for a fact that everything is going to be switched off in terms of picture processing that we do not want. Again, we're quickly going to check the aspect ratio just scan is set to on, so we're getting the full picture. There's no scaling going on. And then we're going to collect advanced settings, and again we're just going to quickly check that everything is switched off that needs to be switched off, and we're going to leave most things at default. So again, we're going to leave pixel brightness at default of 100, contrast at 100, and then make sure that the auto dynamic contrast is off. Now HDR tone mapping, if you want an accurate image, it should technically be switched to off, but for some reason filmmaker mode on the LGs have HDR tone mapping switched on. Basically what HDR tone mapping does is it dynamically changes the image for HDR10 because it does have dynamic metadata. The TV uses histograms and other things to basically come up with what the image should look like and then adjust the tone mapping to suit. But like I say, if you want to have this as the director intended or as the creator intended, then that needs to be switched off. So we're going to switch that to off. And again, we're going to go down to peak brightness. That should be on high for HDR content. Gamma is grayed out because we're now using the PQ EOTF tracking for HDR10 content. Black level at auto and motion eye care is also switched off. So everything there is correct. I'm going to double check in color. And again, we're going to leave everything at default here, auto detect on color gamut. And again, fine tune and white balance. We need a profiled meter and software before we can calibrate those settings. So we're going to leave those well alone out of the box. And then we're going to go to clarity, and then we're just going to double check that everything in here is switched off, apart from cinema screen, which again is a cadence detection that we need for 24 frames per second material. And then true motion is switched off, so we're happy with everything in here. So again, now that we're happy with everything for HDR10, we're going to click apply to all inputs and then click yes. So now when HDR10 content is used with filmmaker mode in any of our inputs, it's going to have the correct settings. So next we're going to move on to Dolby Vision. So moving on to Dolby Vision and Dolby Vision IQ, we'll do Dolby Vision first of all. So again, we're going to go back into settings, and once again we are playing a Dolby Vision encoded title. You can find Dolby Vision content on Netflix. It's quite abundant on Netflix, so that's an easy source to find it, or obviously 4K UHD Blu-ray with Dolby Vision on there. That's where you can get your sources. So the first thing we're going to do here, again, is go into the picture select, and we're going to go to Cinema first of all, because this is the most accurate out of the box for Dolby Vision. What we mean by that is, again, this will follow the creator's intent, just like filmmaker mode. There's no filmmaker mode in Dolby Vision, so we're going to use Cinema. That is the best setting. Again, we're going to select aspect ratio, and we're going to check that Just Scan is on, which it is, and then we're going to go into advanced settings, and then once again, everything should be switched off here that doesn't need to be on. So we're going to brightness, and we're going to leave everything at default here. And once again, everything is set the way it needs to be set, so we don't have to change anything in there. Then we go to color, and again, we're going to leave everything at default here because it should be correct out of the box. The LGs are very good this way in cinema mode. Again, fine tune and white balance. We need a meter and software to set those, which you won't have, so we're not going to do that here. Again, these are the best out of the box settings that we're covering. Clarity. Again, everything should be switched off here. Cinema screen is still on for cadence detection. True motion is switched off. So again, this is the most accurate out of the box for HDR Dolby Vision content. So we're going to apply this to all inputs and then click yes. And that's us done for normal Dolby Vision. So Dolby Vision IQ, what do we do there? How do we get that? So again, we're still feeding the TV a Dolby Vision input material here. So to change to Dolby Vision IQ, you need to go to Cinema Home, and what that does, it switches the light sensor on in the TV. And what Dolby Vision IQ does is it still uses dynamic metadata to change the tone mapping, but it also uses that sensor, the light sensor, to change the image depending on the lighting in your room, so you can see exactly what's going on in the picture, shadow detail, good blacks. You can see what's happening in the peak highlights without it clipping out. But again, it's using the light sensor to do that. But what does happen when you go into Cinema Home is it will switch some of the processing on, and it will grey out some of the areas that we need to show you how to get around those. So before we get into advanced settings, we're just going to check aspect ratio again. Just Scan is switched on. It should remain on once you set that. It should remain on, but it's always worth checking when you're doing your settings. So advanced settings, I'm going to go into brightness here, and everything should be the way we want it in here, and it is. So I'm happy with that. We'll go to color, and again, everything's set the way it should be in here. And again, we're not going to touch fine tune the color management system or the white balance. Now, so when we go into clarity, that things will be switched on that we don't want switched on. So sharpness is up to 20. We definitely want to take that back down to 10 because it is adding a little bit of edge enhancement to stuff in the image. And then super resolution, noise reduction, MPEG noise reduction, and smooth gradation. We want to switch all of these off because we want the best possible image quality to how the creator intended it to be seen. So we want to make sure that we're not scrubbing out fine detail, and we're switching all of these off. Cinema screen is grayed out. Now true motion is also grayed out, and this we want to change because we want to see it as the director intended, creator intended. I've no idea why Dolby insist on having this and having it grayed out, because you would think Dolby would be the one company that would want to do what the creator intended, but for some reason they have interpolation switched on and grayed out. Now we can get around this and switch it off, but what we need to do is we need to find in the general menu the AI service, go in here, and we want to switch off auto genre selection. So we're going to switch that off, and then we're going to go back to the picture, back to advanced settings, back to clarity. And now if we go to the bottom, true motion is now available for us to select. So we are going to select that, and we're going to switch it off. And that's how we get around that. So we now have Dolby Vision IQ, so it's using the light sensor, but it's not scrubbing out detail by having super resolution and noise reduction and everything else on. We're actually seeing the content as it's supposed to be seen, and there's no frame interpolation being added either. So we now have the perfect settings out of the box for Dolby Vision, Dolby Vision IQ, and also we've been through HDR and SDR content. So I hope that you found that useful. If you have any questions, then please do leave them in the comments section down below, and please remember to like and subscribe if you found this video to be useful, and come back and join us again for another video very soon on AV Forums. Thanks for watching.